My wife and I took a vacation in early January a few years ago. I had always wanted to go on a winter vacation with my wife. We saved up for months, and finally, we could make it happen. We went skiing, tubing, and snowboarding. It was the perfect escape from our busy office jobs. The ski resort we visited had a variety of slopes for all skill levels, from beginners to experts. We spent most of our time on the intermediate runs and ventured off to try more challenging slopes. We also had the chance to try snowboarding, which was a new experience. We took a lesson from a professional instructor. We learned the basics of how to balance and maneuver on the board. It was challenging initially, but we quickly picked it up and had a great time on the slopes. But on the third day of our trip, I woke up in the early morning with extreme stomach pain. My wife knew something was wrong, so she immediately brought me to the hospital. It was determined there and then that my appendix needed to be removed. I was rushed into emergency surgery for an appendectomy. The surgery went well, and I woke up in the recovery room. My wife came in to check on me, and I was relieved that everything went well. I was looking forward to going home. However, the nurse told me I had to spend the night in the hospital so that they could monitor my recovery. I was a little frustrated, but I agreed to spend the night. My wife returned to the hotel room to gather some of my belongings and laptop to help pass the time. I noticed that the nurses would come in to check on me, but they would never speak. They would stare at me with blank expressions and then leave. I thought I was just paranoid from the surgery, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something didn't seem right. My wife finally came back with my laptop, and she asked the nurse if she could spend the night with me at the hospital, but the nurse told her she couldn't stay under any circumstances. Sadly, I kissed my wife goodnight and told her I'd see her in the morning. As the night went on, I heard strange noises from the other rooms. It sounded like people were crying and screaming. I tried to ask a nurse about it, but she explained that no one was screaming. I attempted to distract myself from the eerie feeling by opening my laptop and streaming some Netflix shows. After about an hour, I found myself feeling increasingly exhausted. I assumed it was simply the residual effects of the anesthesia from my surgery, so I decided to close my laptop and get some rest. I soon fell asleep. In the dead of night, a piercing scream echoed through the hospital halls and jolted me awake. Without hesitation, I pressed the call button for the nurse and urgently inquired about the scream's source. To my disbelief, the nurse claimed to have heard nothing and assured me that no one was screaming. I found it hard to accept her explanation, as the scream was loud and unmistakable. I attempted to drift back to sleep, but was jolted awake again by another ear-piercing scream from another room. The scream was even more terrifying and louder than the other ones. I immediately pressed the call button for the nurse. Still, again, she denied the screams and insisted that no one was making any noise. Determined to uncover the source of the screams, I set out to investigate. Walking down the hospital hallways, I noticed they were completely empty, devoid of doctors or nurses. The hallway lights were dimmed, almost like the hospital was in some energy-saving mode. The silence and the emptiness of the hospital made it feel like I was the only patient there. I searched every corner and crevice and peered into every room. Despite my thorough search, I couldn't locate the origin of the screams, or anyone who could help me explain the strange noises. The fact that there wasn't any staff, patients, or anyone around made the situation even more unsettling. The hospital was like a ghost town, and the absence of any human presence only added to the anxious feeling. Without warning, another scream pierced the silence and seemed to be coming from a door at the far end of the hallway. Without hesitation, I made my way towards the door, my heart pounding with fear and curiosity. I opened the door and began descending a flight of stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, there was another door. I opened the door and was met with a shocking scene. Inside the room, there were multiple beds, all of them covered in blood. The smell was unbearable, and the atmosphere was suffocating. The walls were painted with strange, cryptic markings that I couldn't comprehend. On a counter, I spotted a large yellow book labelled procedure. The fear was overwhelming, but so was my curiosity. I picked up the book and opened it, discovering it was a diary. As I read through the diary, I learned it belonged to a nurse who had previously worked in the hospital. She detailed her experiences in the hospital, including her forced participation in experimental medical procedures. The procedures were aimed at implanting tracking devices within patients to collect data. The nurse wrote in her diary that the data was sent to an unknown location. Still, she believed it was being collected by the government. The information in the diary was disturbing and left me with more questions than answers. As the realization of what I had read sunk in, a wave of anxiety washed over me. I couldn't ignore whether I had been implanted with a tracking device during my appendectomy surgery. I scanned the room again, and this time, I noticed an array of surgical instruments, pumps, IV bags, and other medical equipment scattered about. My heart sank as I spied a bed pushed against the corner of the room underneath a tarp that gave the appearance of a body lying there. I glanced up above the body, and my gaze fell upon a large security camera that seemed to be directed right at me. Suddenly, all the lights in the room went out except for a black light in the corner. The black light illuminated the cryptic markings on the wall. A vent in the ceiling began to release a green gas that shimmered in the black light. Panicking, I sprinted towards the exit, desperate to escape the suffocating fumes. I quickly went upstairs to my room, crawled into my bed, and tried to calm myself down. I didn't know what to do. Should I call 911? I reached for my phone and began composing a text message to my wife, detailing the bizarre events that had occurred. As I reread the message before sending it, I couldn't help but question the rationality of what I had written. It sounded absolutely insane. I took a deep breath and tried to convince myself that maybe it had all just been a hallucination brought on by the anesthesia. Despite my attempts to rationalize it, a sense of unease remained in my mind and I couldn't shake it off. After about an hour, the nurse returned to my room to check on me. She asked me how I was feeling, and I replied that I was doing well. However, what really troubled me was the look she gave me. It was as if she knew I had left my bed and had seen something I shouldn't have. After a moment of silence, she leaned toward my ear and started whispering. She told me she knew I had left my bed, and if it were to happen again, she would force me to spend another night at the hospital. She then took out a stethoscope and placed it on my chest. She told me my heart may be beating fine now, but if I were to leave my bed again, that might change. After that, she immediately left the room. I swallowed hard and prayed I'd make it through the night unscathed. I stayed alert, keeping watch throughout the night, prepared to defend myself if something ominous were to occur. The following day, my wife came to pick me up, and we finally left the hospital. The experience left me with a hovering feeling of anxiety. The strange noises, empty hallways, cryptic markings, and the diary I found all added to the stress. The thought of being implanted with a tracking device without my knowledge or consent haunted me. Despite the terrifying events of that night, I kept the details to myself and never confessed the truth to my wife. I suspected she would not have believed me, even if I had told her. Even after leaving the hospital, the memory of that night lingered with me. A couple of months after the incident, I stumbled upon an article while browsing the news about the same hospital where I had stayed. To my shock, I learned that it had been shut down due to malpractice. This revelation only amplified my earlier suspicions and left me wondering if something sinister had been inflicted upon me while there. The questions and doubts plaguing my mind persisted, and even to this day, I still ponder about the true nature of that hospital.